never did. Aconteus, a handsome nobody from Chios, spots rich girl Cydippe under the temple colonnade. He can't speak to her, class gap miles wide, but he can exploit Olympus's fine print. He scratches on an apple. I swear by Artemis to marry Aconteus. He rolls it to her sandal. She idly picks it up and reads the words aloud, which in Artemis's precinct equals a binding oath. Cydippe leaves confused, but every time her father arranges a proper fiancé, she collapses with fever so savage priests fear plague. The oracle digs through the divine TOS and finds the hitch. She's already sworn. When Cydippe finally weds Aconteus, the fevers vanish. Artemis shows up, not angry but amused, honoring the couple with everlasting fidelity in exchange for the clever tribute. Moral: speak casually under a goddess's roof and the contract is in ink you can't see. Long before the Trojan War, the island had no king, only scattered fishermen and goats. Then a stranger arrived, Cycreus, towering, scarred, carrying a bronze spear notched with unknown runes. He spoke little, ate alone, but worked miracles. He dug cisterns where springs burst overnight, charmed a wild stallion into kneeling, and once, locals swear, stood barefoot in a ring of fire to prove courage to the storm god. By year's end, the islanders begged him to rule. They didn't know he walked with a secret. He dreamt every night of fire-scaled dragons devouring his childhood village, and woke with soot under his nails though no hearth burned nearby. Months after his coronation, goats began disappearing. Nets came up shredded as if bitten by iron teeth. One dusk, a shepherd stumbled into the agora, eyes wide, clutching a bronze scale the size of a dinner plate, edges smoking. He'd found it at the mouth of a cave where the mountain met the sea. Cycreus said nothing, only studied the scale under torchlight. It matched the color of the runes on his spear. That night, villagers saw their king ride alone toward the cave. From cliffs, they watched the torchlight vanish into the maw. Minutes stretched into hours. Then, roaring deep enough to quake wine jars on kitchen shelves, flame burst from the cave mouth. Shadows of two giants, one man, one serpent, wrestled on the cave wall like monstrous puppet theater. At dawn, silence. Cycreus emerged, armor warped, spearhead glowing red. Behind him dragged the colossal corpse of a sea dragon, neck twisted, fangs snapped, eyes like boiled copper. The island erupted in praise. They crowned him with laurel and called him Draken Soter, dragon savior. Yet some noticed his smile was hollow, as if slaying the beast had lanced a boil he secretly cherished. After the triumph feast, Cycreus changed. He paced battlements at midnight, muttering in a guttural tongue. His bathwater steamed black. Servants insisted the steam coiled like a serpent before dissolving. One harvest festival, a child accidentally spilled wine on his boots. Cycreus roared, eyes flashing ember orange, and the boy swore he saw scales ripple under the king's skin. Rumors spread. Had the battle fused man and monster? Or darker, had Cycreus never slain the dragon at all? Had he absorbed it? When storms flattened olive groves and fishermen found their nets burnt as though by underwater fire, the islanders panicked. They begged Eurystheus of Athens to intervene. The hero sailed with 50 hoplites, each carrying asbestos-soaked nets and mirrored shields to confuse reptilian eyes. But at the gate they met not a beast, only their king, bare-chested, spear discarded, arms raised. Cycreus confessed. The dragon's fury had leaked into him. He'd battled it outside and now battled it within, losing ground each night. "Bind me or burn me," he said. Eurystheus chose mercy darker than execution, exile. He ferried Cycreus to Eleusis, gift-wrapping the cursed king for the goddess Demeter, whose own grief could understand corrupted power. Demeter accepted, appointing Cycreus as guardian of her holy processions, his inner fire now repurposed to ward off all lesser threats. As Cycreus's ship slipped away, islanders swore the shoreline hissed, not from waves, but from a dragon's whisper receding with its unwilling host. Salamis kept the dragon's bronze scales nailed above city gates for centuries, tarnished mirrors reminding every leader, conquer your monsters, yes, but never wear their skins. Power taken from terror carries terror's seed. When rage becomes crown, abdication may be salvation. Young hunter Tiresias strikes the snakes with his staff. Hera curses him into a woman for 7 years. He marries, bears children, learns the loom songs of grief men never hear. 7 winters later, he meets the serpents again, carefully steps over them, spell breaks. He's male once more. Later, Zeus and Hera bicker. Who enjoys love more, man or woman? They drag Tiresias in as data point. He sides with Zeus. Women feel 9 times the pleasure. Hera, furious, blinds him. Zeus, guilt-struck, gifts prophecy and a lifespan of 7 generations. Thus, the greatest seer of Thebes walks the tightrope of fate without eyesight, yet clearer vision than any living soul. It's said he chuckled on his deathbed. Blind, I've seen 2 worlds, inside and out. King Ceyx sails to consult an oracle. Wife Alcyone prays he waits for calmer weather. He doesn't. Zeus, annoyed that Ceyx invoked him too often in casual oaths, hurls a thunderstorm that swallows the ship. Ceyx's spirit, soaked and shivering, begs Iris to carry a goodbye. Sleep god Morpheus impersonates Ceyx's drowned corpse in Alcyone's dream. She wakes screaming, runs to the surf. There's the real body, ghost pale in foam. In raw despair, she leaps after him. The gods, pierced by this double plunge, morph the lovers mid-air into halcyon birds, kingfishers with royal blue backs. To let their floating nest survive, Zeus stills the winter seas for 14 days every January. Sailors call it the halcyon days, when storms bank their rage and even grief takes a coffee break. Which transformation slapped hardest? Tree, oath, dragon, gender shift, or bird? Hit the comments. Smash like. If you'll think twice before reading random fruit out loud, subscribe for next week's plunge into the 3 mortals who blackmailed the fates. And ring that bell. Unlike Zeus's thunder, it won't roast you for imposter syndrome. See you in the halcyon calm.
Athena, the goddess of wisdom, war, and strategy, was one of the most powerful deities in Greek mythology. Feared by enemies, honored by heroes, and even challenging Zeus himself, Athena's legacy shaped legends, wars, and the very foundations of civilization. But was she truly a goddess of justice, or was there a darker side to her wisdom? Let's dive into the real story of Athena. Athena wasn't born like other gods. She burst fully grown from Zeus's head, armed with a spear and shield, a goddess of war and wisdom from the very start. But her story is more than just divine power. It's one of strategy, conflict, and influence that shaped the Greek world. The protector of heroes, Athena wasn't just a warrior. She was a tactician, a guide, and the ultimate ally to heroes. She helped Odysseus outwit the gods, gave Perseus the shield to defeat Medusa, and was the unseen force behind many Greek victories. The battle for Athens, Athena and Poseidon competed for control of the greatest city in Greece. Poseidon offered a mighty ocean, but Athena gave the olive tree, a symbol of wisdom and prosperity. The people chose her gift, and Athens was named in her honor. The merciless judge? Athena may have been wise, but was she just? When Medusa was assaulted in her temple, Athena didn't punish Poseidon, she punished Medusa, turning her into a monster. Later, she created the first court of law, showing her power wasn't just in battle, it was in justice, law, and politics. Wisdom and war, always balanced. Unlike Ares, the god of chaos and bloodshed, Athena's warfare was tactical, calculated, and precise. She was the goddess of the battlefield, but also the goddess of philosophy, craftsmanship, and knowledge. a balance between violence and intelligence. Her lasting legacy, Athena's symbols, the owl, the shield, and the olive tree, still represent wisdom, strategy, and peace today. The Parthenon, her great temple, still stands, and her influence can be seen in modern philosophy, war strategy, and even democracy itself. Athena wasn't just a goddess of wisdom. She was a warrior, a ruler, and a force that shaped civilizations. But was she truly wise, or just the ultimate strategist who always got her way? Want more deep dives into legendary gods and goddesses? Subscribe now and uncover the myths and realities of ancient deities.
Hey, myth explorers. Ready to wander off the beaten mythological path? You know Zeus's thunderbolts and Hercules' labors. Fine. But what about the day the bees turned their backs on their god? Or the huntress whose sons were cursed to become flesh-hungry bears? Or a girl so clever Athena loved her, then hated her enough to shrink her to an ant? And finally, an apple that quite literally broke a young man's heart. Keep watching. Each tale swerves from wonder to horror to bittersweet awe, and the last lines of every story connect like hidden threads. Miss even 30 seconds, and you'll lose the clue that ties them all together. When Zeus married Hera, Hermes carried gold-edged invites to every being, mortal, divine, animal. Chelone, a river nymph, accepted with a careless nod, but when the day came, she sniffed at the sky, poked the embers in her hearth, and sighed, "My little house is warmer than Olympus." Hours later, the wedding procession rolled past in thundercloud pomp. Hermes spotted Chelone's empty chair. Rage ignited in his silver sandals. He swooped down, seized the entire cottage, roof, pillars, walls, Chelone still clutching a teacup inside. One spell later, cottage and nymph fused into a single creature, shell on the back, head poked out, doomed to crawl forever carrying the home she wouldn't abandon. The first tortoise. Locals swear that on spring evenings, if you kneel by a brook and whisper, "Leaving soon?" any tortoise nearby will retreat into its shell, tiny echo of a goddess-scorned recluse. Long before "Save the Bees" was a slogan, there was Aristaeus, demigod shepherd, inventor of cheese, olive oil, and above all, beekeeping. People swore the hum of his hives kept sickness out of the valley. Then one midsummer dawn, every bee lay motionless, wings stiff as parchment. The air that once thrummed with life sat dead and silent. The villagers called it the funeral of the bees. Desperate, Aristaeus trekked through reeds to consult Proteus, the shape-shifting sea prophet. Proteus, half seal, half seer, spat seawater and hissed, "The nymphs of the meadows curse you for the part you played in Eurydice's death. Mourn in their tongue, blood, smoke, and remembrance. The penance? 4 pure bulls and 4 unblemished heifers sacrificed at a spring, their carcasses left to rot beneath the sun. An act so revolting only the gods could read its poetry." Aristaeus obeyed, mouth clamped against nausea. On the third sunrise, he returned. From one bull's ribcage poured a golden cloud, brand new bees born from death itself, swirling like incense into the sky. The message was brutal but clear. Regeneration demands sacrifice. Aristaeus fell to his knees, honeyed tears streaking his cheeks as the swarm chose his outstretched arms as their first hive. King Minos wanted an army, one soldier. So Hephaestus cast Talos, a walled fortress of molten copper now hardened into bronze. 3 times a day, Talos circled the island. Invaders saw a man-sized sunrise sprinting the shoreline, hurling stones the size of oxen. Yet, the godsmith built Talos with a single flaw, a plug at his ankle, sealing a vein that pulsed ichor, divine lifeblood. Cue Jason and the Argonauts, desperate to dock. The witch Medea stepped forward, eyes glinting like mercury. "Mighty Talos, you are metal, but do you feel pain?" She sang of mortality, of rust, of endless duty with no rest. The bronze giant, half mind, half mechanism, knelt suddenly aware. A breeze teased the nail loose. One crimson gold jet spurted. Talos staggered, knees carving trenches in sand, and crashed, an empty shell echoing like a temple bell. Crete was silent but for the hiss of ichor boiling away. Local fishermen still claim some sunsets tint the sea bronze, Talos's lifeblood swirling just beneath the waves, hunting for its lost shell. Coronis of Thessaly loved Apollo, or thought she did, until a mortal soldier caught her eye. While Apollo healed plague in Delphi, Coronis entertained her new lover in secret. Only the raven, Apollo's avian spy, saw everything. The bird wrestled with the knowledge. If it spoke, a human would die. If it stayed silent, a god would suffer humiliation. Instinct 1, loyalty to the sun. It flew for 3 days, trailing white feathers through storm clouds, and crashed onto Apollo's lap to report the betrayal. Apollo's rage was surgical. One golden arrow, one heartbeat, Coronis felled. But as her blood soaked the sheets, guilt hit harder than plague, because Coronis carried his unborn son, Asclepius. Apollo yanked the child from the dying womb, gave him to the centaur Chiron, and spun on the trembling raven. You wanted me to see darkness. Now wear it. Flames the color of a lunar eclipse licked across white plumage, charring every feather jet black. The raven screeched, not from pain, but from shame immortalized. From then on, ravens lost the ability to speak in clear words. All that's left is the croak that sounds like a secret you can't quite make out. King Salmoneus looked at Olympus and saw a marketing opportunity. He forged iron wheels that struck bronze streets, sparking hellish fire. He hung bronze kettles along rope bridges, and when his servants tugged the ropes, they roared like thunder across the sky. During festivals, he hurled lit torches from his chariot, shouting, "Tremble, mortals! I am Zeus!" Crowds, half fearful, half entertained, showered him with offerings. Thunder for Hire became the hottest ticket north of Delphi, but word climbed the air like smoke, reached the real Zeus, who waited for the perfect dramatic sting. On Salmonia's grandest fate, dark clouds gathered, but the sky remained eerily quiet. Salmoneus rode out, ready to drop his counterfeit thunder. Zeus answered with the genuine article, a single bolt that vaporized the rope bridges, melted the bronze road into a river of screaming metal, and hurled Salmoneus, chariot, horses, ego, into Tartarus. There, chained to a rotating rock, he hears only one sound. Authentic thunder he can never claim. Locals swear the ruins of Salmonia still ring on electric nights. Metallic echoes of Zeus performing an audit on false advertising. Polyphonte, one-time devotee of Artemis, vowed to remain chaste, but Aphrodite, never fond of holdouts, infected her with lust for a passing bear. Yes, a bear. Polyphonte vanished into the woods and returned months later with twin boys, Agrius and Aureus, towering, coarse-haired, with appetites that chilled the blood. They laughed at altars, hunted travelers, and roasted human limbs over campfires. Zeus finally snapped. He ordered Hermes to punish the whole family in whatever way preserves terror for future ages. Hermes, unwilling to butcher newborns, enlisted Ares, who gleefully bound the twins upside down and hacked off hands and feet. But before the blade fell again, the gods changed their minds, opting for metamorphosis over gore. Polyphonte became the Strix, a death omen owl whose shriek freezes armies. Aureus twisted into a towering eagle owl, herald of war. Agrius sank into the body of a vulture, forever gnawing carrion. And the family's hillside cave? Locals swear it still reeks of smoke and sweet meat. Farmers mark its mouth with iron nails. Iron, they say, silences bare-born ghosts. Next time an owl howls before battle, remember Polyphone's cursed lullaby, a mother's love curdled into dread for every soldier who hears it. Athena once chose an Attic girl named Myrmex as her personal protégé. The goddess introduced a dream project, the world's first plow. Myrmex watched, learned, then, intoxicated by the crowd's applause, whispered that she had invented the tool. Athena's gray eyes darkened. Soon after, a jealous wind shoved Myrmex while she harvested wheat. She staggered, dropped an armful of sheaves, and heard laughter, a cruel echo of her own boast. Athena emerged, face sorrowful. You craved the harvest without the humility. She tapped the girl's forehead. Instantly, Myrmex shrank, limbs splitting, waist pinching. An ant scuttled where a maiden had stood, destined to steal crumbs of grain for eternity, mimicking the theft of Athena's credit. Centuries later, Zeus needed loyal subjects for his son Aeacus in barren Aegina. He saw the ant swarm and, in a grim joke, transformed them into soldiers. The Myrmidons, silent, disciplined, famous under Achilles at Troy. The bravest army in myth owes its origin to a single boastful sentence. Medusa grew up alongside the breathtaking Adonis under the roof of King Cinyras. Where Adonis was radiant, Medusa was steady, guard, confidant, brother in all but blood. When a boar gored Adonis in Aphrodite's sacred grove, every flower dimmed, and Medusa felt his chest collapse inward. Days later, they brought Adonis's body home. Melos strung a rope from a pomegranate tree and hanged himself, grief carving deeper than any tusk. His wife Pelea followed. Aphrodite arrived, drenched in her own tears, too late to save them, but not too late to transform them. Melos became the apple tree, branches heavy with fruit the color of heart blood. Pelea became the dove, eternal companion to Aphrodite, cooing in the apple's boughs. Their infant son, also named Melos, was spared and ordered to Delos to teach islanders the craft of shearing sheep. Ever since, Greeks call flocks mela in his honor. Legend says when an apple falls perfectly into a lover's open palm, Melos is granting a fragment of his devotion, a reminder that love can be both sweet and lethal. Every crunch echoes a heartbreak older than history. Careful who you offer an apple to. Aphrodite might just be listening. Which boundary breaker freaked you out most? Drop your vote below. Smash like if you'll think twice before faking thunder. Subscribe for Forgotten Monsters next week, and ring the bell. Unlike Melinoe, notifications haunt only by day. See you in the echoes. Centaurs. Half man, half horse. Heroes or savages? Think you know the full story? Wait until you uncover the darker side of these iconic creatures. Watch till the end to discover what ancient myths don't tell you about the Centaurs. In Greek mythology, Centaurs were seen as both wild and noble beings. They were often depicted as powerful warriors, famous for their strength and skill in battle. But what if the truth behind them was far more sinister than anyone imagined? While some centaurs, like Chiron, were revered for their wisdom and kindness, many others were violent, uncontrollable creatures. These savage centaurs were known for their drunken brawls and uncontrollable rage. The most infamous event? The Battle of the Lapiths and Centaurs, where they fought against the Lapiths during a wedding feast, leading to a massacre of both men and women. Their brutal behavior was more than just a mythological tale. It symbolized the chaos that could occur when civilization collided with the wild, untamed forces of nature. But why did the Greeks depict centaurs this way? Was it a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and savagery? or a deeper reflection on humanity's struggle between reason and instinct. The darker truth behind the centaur myth might just hold the key to understanding the wild, primal side of ancient Greek culture. Centaurs are more than just mythical beasts. They represent the conflict within us all. If you're fascinated by the hidden truths of ancient myths, don't forget to subscribe for more dark stories from Greek mythology. Welcome back, lore hunters. Tonight I'm unwrapping some myths that slip through the cracks of pop culture, tales so rich you could live in them for weeks. Let the veils fall. Old Phaon hauled passengers between Lesbos and Asia Minor in a skiff patched more than a beggar's coat. One dusk he carried an aged woman for free when storms canceled the rich man's coin. She touched his wrist, her skin warmed like sunrise. That crone revealed herself as Aphrodite. Payment: an alabaster jar of rose-scented balm. Phaon rubbed a dab on his temples. Waves reflected a new face, jaw sharp, curls ink black. Word of the god-veined ferryman blitzed across isles. Queens queued for night voyages. Fame fed on humility until none was left. Phaon mocked old lovers, hiked his fares, painted his hull with gold leaf. Aphrodite, hearing temple incense now dedicated to Phaon instead of herself, revisited, this time as a scarred sailor claiming poverty. Rebuked, she cursed the balm to invert. Every admiring gaze would now age him a year. By next moon, the once idol looked like driftwood. He vanished, some say into the strait's whirlpool, others into a hermit cave. Poets still swear his ghostly skiff appears on starless nights. If you board, you arrive at dawn a decade older, pockets full of rose petals that rot before noon. Queen Althea of Calydon screamed through her labor as the hearth fire hissed. From the embers, a coal spat out, a single firebrand the length of a dagger. The fates appeared, scissors glinting. Lachesis measured the newborn's life against that coal. Clotho whispered, "When the wood is ash, the boy is dust." Althea snatched the brand, quenched it in a silver urn, and hid it under her bed. The baby, Meleager, grew into a spear god in the training yard. None but his mother guessed why storms seemed to pause for him. Years later, Artemis loosed a boar monstrous as a siege tower to punish King Oeneus for a skipped sacrifice. Hunters from every Greek polis gathered. Meleager led, eyes bright as forge fire. Among the heroes strode Atalanta, swift, lethal, and female, an affront to the older princes. In the thicket, Atalanta's arrow struck first blood. Meleager's spear finished the beast. He offered her the pelt. Male egos erupted. Two of Meleager's uncles drew blades. Meleager defended the huntress, slaying his own kin. Word sprinted ahead of him to the palace. Althea collapsed at news her brothers lay dead by her son's hand. Grief wrestled prophecy in her chest. Shaking, she fetched the firebrand, lit a torch, and held both over the brazier. Her love warred her rage for 9 heartbeats. On the 10th, she let the wood slip. Miles away, Meleager felt his marrow ignite. He dropped mid-stride, armor ringing like a funeral bell. At the palace hearth, the brand hissed its last and fell to gray powder. Althea watched the flakes swirl, then walked into the flames herself. In Calydon, they still say, "Whatever a mother births, her fire can reclaim." Young Cyparissus roamed Chios with a bronze shepherd's crook taller than himself. Apollo, idling in mortal disguise, gifted the boy a tame stag crowned with ivory antlers. It followed him like sunrise follows dawn. One blistering noon, flies tormented the stag. Cyparissus, meaning only mercy, aimed his javelin to shoo them. The tip glanced off a stone, pierced soft flank. The deer collapsed, breath misting blood. Cyparissus dropped beside it, sobs carving caverns in his throat. Apollo arrived to heal, Lyre weeping gold notes. But the boy refused salvation for himself. He begged, "Give me a grief that never dries, so I remember him forever." Clouds boiled violet, the ground drank color from his sandals upward. Where Cyparissus knelt now stands the first cypress, trunk straight as a spear of mourning, sap weeping resin tears. Greeks plant the tree in graveyards because its roots plunge only downward, never sideways, like a grief that refuses distraction. On summer nights, hunters claim the wind through cypress needles sounds like antlers brushing the sky. Athens hailed Cephalus and Procris as couple of the century. He an expert hunter, she a devotee of Artemis. As wedding gift, the goddess sent two marvels: Lalaps, a hound fated to catch any quarry, and a spear destined never to miss. One morning, Cephalus rested from the chase and sang to the breeze, calling it Nephele, sweet comfort. The dawn goddess Eos, eavesdropping, snatched him skyward, offering immortality. He pined for Procris. Eos scoffed, "She'll betray you." Suspicion slid under his skin like splintered arrow reeds. Cephalus returned in disguise, bribing servants to hint Procris had strayed. At twilight, she arrived in the woods, masked, to spy on him first. Hearing rustle, Cephalus loosed the divine spear toward the sound. It cannot miss. The mask tore away, Procris's eyes wide as shattering glass. She fell against his chest, whispering only, "The breeze, remember?" Cephalus buried her on Mount Hymettus, pinned the fatal spear beside the grave, and leashed Laiolaps there eternally. Some nights, hikers see a spectral dog chase a phantom hare in circles that never close, while a jealous wind mutters the name Nephele through the pines. Poor farmer Ligdus told his pregnant wife, "If the child is female, exposure must follow. Dowries ruin paupers." Desperate Telethusa prayed to Isis. The goddess appeared, golden-winged. "Bear the child, raise her as son." Baby Iphis arrived. They bound her chest, taught her spearcraft, named her heir. At 13, Iphis was betrothed to radiant Ianthe, who adored her future husband. Iphis loved her too, but carried a secret that tore her apart. Nights she begged Isis, "Either unmake love or unmake lie." Eve of the wedding, Iphis roamed the temple till exhaustion. At midnight, statue eyes flashed, muscle quaked under skin, voice dropped like falling figs. When dawn trumpets blew, Iphis emerged, broad-shouldered, jaw square, still wearing mother's hopes, but now truth-shaped. Ceremony erupted in double amazement. A father spared from murder, a bride gaining the groom her heart already knew, a city given a living parable that gods can edit, flesh the way poets edit verse. On anniversaries, Crete's couples exchange braided veils, symbol that love may bend rules when petitioned with courage. Satyr-blooded Ampelus dazzled Dionysus, youth swagger, curls like grape tendrils. He rode a bull through vineyards, boasting he was braver than the god. Dionysus, half teasing, half testing, sent a gadfly. The bull bucked. Ampelus flew, spine meeting earth with a wet crack. Thunderclouds curdled purple. Grief-stricken, the god plucked the corpse's heartbeat, planted it. From ribs sprouted twisting vines, from fingers curling shoots. First grapes. He fermented their juice with tears, naming the wine Ampelosios, the taste of regret. Every toast pours a little myth, sweetness chased by sting. Drink deep and you repeat the boy's brag, but this time, hopefully, know when to dismount. On the gray docks of Anthedon, a lone fisherman named Glaucus noticed something odd. Every fish he caught leapt back into the sea after flopping across a patch of wild green herbs. His curiosity, half hunger, half science, won. He tasted one leaf. A heartbeat later, his pulse throttled like a war drum, gills tore open on his neck. Terrified, he dove overboard and discovered he could breathe brine like air. In the midnight blue below, sea deities gathered, nereids swirling like living lace, old Phorcys with crab shell crown. They greeted the newcomer, then forced a cup of ichor on him. Drink, forget the shore. Visions blitzed his skull, shipwrecks yet to come, lovers yet to drown. Prophecy is a toxin that never metabolizes. Glaucus tried to surface, to hug his aging mother, but every wave slapped him back. Barnacles crusted over his old rowing calluses. He practiced his new craft instead, whispering tides to sailors, trading secrets for offerings of bronze and bread that sank unreachable. Legend says if you stare into rough surf and hear your own name, it's Glaucus warning you to turn home. Ignore him, and you join his choir. Another voice lost to the deep. In Attica ruled Periphas, so just that subjects built temples to him, not Zeus. Offerings piled higher than to Olympus. Flattery sharpens divine talons. Thunderhead over the palace. As lightning coiled to strike, Apollo intervened. Spare the righteous, punish the praise. Zeus relented, halfway. Before the court's eyes, Periphas's flesh rippled into plumage, arms broadened into stormbreaker wings. His queen begged accompaniment, became an osprey. Throne room glittered with abandoned gold. Zeus decreed the new eagle his personal herald. Immortal, hungry for serpents of hubris. Every lightning flash, tradition holds Periphas scouts ahead, making sure no mortal altars bear the wrong name again. Arcadian huntress Callisto pledged lifelong virginity to Artemis. Oaths echo loudest in forest silence. Zeus, disguised as Artemis, tricked Callisto when her secret pregnancy showed. The real goddess burned with double fury, betrayed and impersonated. Artemis transformed the girl into a shaggy bear. Callisto's newborn, Arcus, left human. Years later, on a hunt, Arcus drew bow at the lunging bear, unaware it was his mother. Zeus intervened, flinging both into the sky as Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. They circle Polaris forever, never touching, an eternal near miss engraved in stars. Notice how each story spins one spindle. Desire collides with destiny, and form shatters. Greek myth isn't merely about gods showing off, it's about limits. And the instant you cross them, reality melts and recools into shapes that remember the crime. Which of tonight's transformations branded you hardest? Firebrand, spear, cypress, rose curse, or braided veil? Write its name in the comments, but add one line. If this myth were my life lesson, I'd finish the sentence. Best confession gets read on next episode. Immortal as any Greek hero. Slap that like if you felt the heat of Meleager's log or the sea spray of Phaon's oars. Subscribe and ring the bell so the algorithm threads your name into our next tapestry. Remember, stories are sparks. Hold them too lightly and they fade. Grip them too hard and they burn. Find your balance. See you in the weave. Hor, the thunder god, woke up to find his greatest nightmare had come true. Mjolnir, his mighty hammer that could level mountains and control lightning itself, was gone. Without it, the thunder god was powerless, vulnerable, and mocked. The weapon that defined his very identity as protector of Asgard had vanished without a trace. But what happened next would humiliate him more than any defeat in battle. To get his hammer back, Thor would have to do something that went against every fiber of his warrior identity. You won't believe the disguise he ends up in. It all began on what should have been an ordinary morning in Asgard. Picture Thor reaching for the leather grip that had been at his side for countless centuries, his fingers closing around nothing but empty air. The spot where Mjolnir should rest felt cold and wrong, like a missing tooth that your tongue keeps finding. Thor's morning routine, as predictable as sunrise over Asgard's golden halls, shattered in that single moment of realization. The hammer forged by dwarven masters, the weapon that could summon lightning and level mountains, had vanished without so much as a whisper of sound. The initial shock hit Thor like a physical blow. His hand remained suspended in space, still reaching for what wasn't there. Then panic crept in, cold and relentless. He let out a blood-curdling roar of sheer rage, the whole palace trembling. Without Mjolnir, he was powerless, vulnerable, and mocked, stripped of the weapon that made him Asgard's primary defender. The enemies that prowled the borders of the Nine Realms knew about his mighty hammer. They counted on Thor's strength to keep them at bay. Now that strength was gone. Word spread through Asgard's halls faster than wildfire. The other gods gathered in emergency council, their faces grave as they grasped the full scope of the crisis. Odin's ravens had brought no news. The watchmen at the gates had seen nothing. Mjolnir had simply disappeared, as if it had never existed at all. The assembled gods understood what Thor's loss meant for their realm. Asgard stood vulnerable, its greatest protector reduced to a shadow of his former self. Loki stepped forward through the crowd of worried gods, his familiar, cunning smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He offered to investigate the theft using his shape-shifting abilities, volunteering to venture where other gods could not go undetected. The council accepted his proposal immediately, desperate for any lead in their search. Thor watched his brother prepare for the mission, knowing that Loki's success or failure would determine his own fate. Loki first borrowed Freya's magic feathered coat, allowing him to fly in falcon form to Jotunheim without raising alarms. Each dead end pushed Thor deeper into desperation. He imagined facing his enemies defenseless, their laughter echoing as they realized the thunder god carried no thunder. The trail finally led to the most dangerous territory of all, Jotunheim, the realm of the giants. Loki strode into the council chamber with the confident gait of someone who had solved a mystery, but his expression carried an ominous weight. The giant Thrym, lord of the frost giants, had openly boasted about his theft from his massive throne of ice and stone. He had buried Mjolnir 8 leagues beneath the frozen earth of his realm, thrice deeper than any giant's hall, he claimed, placing it where even Thor's strength would be useless. Thrym had what he thought was a simple demand for the Norse gods. He wanted the beautiful goddess Freya as his bride in exchange for the hammer's return. The giant had fixated on her legendary beauty and grace, convinced that possessing both Mjolnir and the goddess of love would make him the most powerful being in all the 9 realms. His arrogance knew no bounds as he described his elaborate wedding plans to Loki, speaking of golden halls and feasts that would last for weeks. Thrym believed the gods had no choice but to accept his terms. When Loki spoke to the council about Thrym's demand, the council fell silent. Freya's reaction shattered the tense quiet that followed Loki's report, causing her rage to break the Brysinger necklace, its gems scattering across the floor in glittering fragments. She declared she would rather throw herself into the deepest ocean than marry the frost giant who dared make such a demand. The gods found themselves trapped in an impossible situation. They could sacrifice one of their most beloved goddesses to a giant's lust, or they could leave Thor permanently weakened and Asgard vulnerable to every enemy that prowled the borders. The council erupted in frantic debate. Some suggested launching a full assault on Jotunheim, but Thrym's fortress was impregnable and his army vast. Others proposed trickery or negotiation, but every path led to either devastating war or humiliating surrender. Heimdall, the far-seeing guardian who watched over the Rainbow Bridge, had remained silent throughout the heated discussions. When he finally spoke, his words stopped every conversation in the hall. His suggestion was so outrageous, so completely unthinkable, that even Loki's jaw dropped open in shock. The gods stared at Heimdall as if he had lost his mind, but they were out of other options. What he proposed, however, would challenge everything Thor stood for as a warrior. Heimdall's words hung in the air like a challenge to the very foundations of Norse honor. The far-seeing god had suggested that Thor disguise himself as a bride and infiltrate Thrym's wedding feast to recover Mjolnir. He spoke with calm authority, tie housewife's keys about his waist, and pin bridal jewels upon his breast. The idea was so fundamentally opposed to Norse concepts of masculine honor that Thor's initial response shook the very walls of Asgard. He declared the plan preposterous and swore he would never hear the end of it if word spread that the thunder god had dressed as a woman. The assembled gods watched in tense silence as their mightiest protector wrestled with a challenge that could not be solved through brute force or lightning strikes. They had already considered launching a full assault on Jotunheim, but Thrym's fortress was impregnable and his army vast. No other choice remained. Thor paced the hall like a caged wolf, his massive fists clenched as he grappled with the impossible choice between his warrior's pride and his duty to protect Asgard. Every instinct in his body rebelled against the idea of abandoning his identity as a fearsome warrior to play the role of a delicate bride. Loki stepped forward with barely contained excitement, volunteering to accompany Thor as his maidservant. The trickster god's eagerness to participate in this elaborate deception revealed his true nature. While Thor struggled with the concept, Loki was already plotting the specifics of costumes, mannerisms, and the lies they would need to maintain throughout their dangerous mission. The transformation began with layers of bridal linen draped over Thor's massive frame. Servants brought forth delicate jewelry, housewives' keys that symbolized domestic authority, and a dainty hood for his head. Finally came the precious necklace of Brisingar. Each item added to the disguise felt like another blow to Thor's warrior identity. When he finally looked at his reflection, the god of thunder saw an unconvincing bride staring back at him. Thor finally accepted the plan because no alternative existed. The unlikely pair prepared to set off for enemy territory, where their deception would face its ultimate test among giants, eager to celebrate their lord's triumph. The great hall of Thrym's fortress buzzed with excitement as giants gathered to witness their lord's marriage to the most beautiful goddess in all the 9 realms. Thor sat at the high table in his bridal disguise, surrounded by massive frost giants who raised their drinking horns in celebration. The feast spread before them displayed the giants' wealth and power. Roasted oxen filled enormous platters, fresh salmon gleamed on silver dishes, and barrels of mead stood ready to fuel the night's festivities. Thor's legendary appetite struck like a thunderbolt. He polished off an ox and ate whole salmon in moments, tearing through the meat as if he hadn't eaten in weeks. 3 measures of mead vanished as quickly as if someone had poured them into a bottomless pit. The assembled giants watched in stunned silence as the delicate bride consumed more food than most warriors could handle. Thrym's eyes narrowed with growing suspicion. This goddess ate like a battle-hardened warrior, returning from a long campaign, not like the refined Freya he expected to marry. Loki stepped forward with the smooth confidence of a master storyteller. He spun a tale about Freya's 8-day fast in eager anticipation of reaching Jotunheim and marrying the mighty Thrym. The explanation painted a picture of a lovesick goddess, so excited about her wedding that she had refused all food during her journey. The giants nodded in understanding, their suspicions melting away as they accepted this romantic explanation. Thrym felt honored by such devotion and relaxed completely, his doubts vanishing. Beneath his bridal veil, Thor's rage simmered like molten metal ready to explode. Every moment at the feast brought new challenges as he struggled to maintain feminine mannerisms while surrounded by his enemies. His massive hands shook with barely controlled fury as he watched the giants celebrate what they believed was their victory over Asgard. The critical moment finally arrived. Thrym commanded his servants to bring Mjolnir forth, the very moment Thor had trained his eyes on since dawn. The servants placed the legendary weapon before the disguised bride as part of the traditional ceremony. Thor's fingers closed around Mjolnir's familiar handle, and lightning immediately crackled through the hall. He ripped away his bridal veil and roared his true identity to the shocked giants. Thrym's eyes widened in terror as he realized the bride he had been celebrating was actually the god of thunder himself. Thor swung Mjolnir, killing Thrym instantly after crushing his skull with Mjolnir, then turned on the assembled giants, and even the pleading giantess met Mjolnir's crack before the hall fell silent. The theft that had begun with arrogance ended in complete destruction. This tale reveals how even the mightiest heroes must sometimes sacrifice their pride to protect what matters most. Back in Asgard, the Aesir never spoke of the bearded bride again, though a few still hide a smirk when Thor raises Mjolnir. And we end this story with a very valuable lesson. Never steal Thor's hammer. And if you're going to, don't make him dress like a woman. Ever wondered what it would be like to walk through the ancient world and encounter mythical creatures from Greek mythology? Get ready to meet the beasts that shaped legends. In Greek mythology, creatures were more than just beasts. They were symbols of the forces of nature, God's will, and humanity's struggle with the unknown. From the terrifying Minotaur lurking in the labyrinth to the mesmerizing sirens luring sailors to their doom, these creatures were as captivating as they were dangerous. The mighty Hydra, with its multiple heads that regrew each time they were cut off, was a symbol of unstoppable power. The Cerberus, the three-headed dog guarding the gates of the underworld, represented the barrier between life and death. But not all mythical creatures were monsters. The graceful Pegasus, a winged horse born from the blood of Medusa, symbolizes freedom and the pursuit of the heavens. These creatures still live on in our stories, haunting the shadows of ancient Greece and whispering through the winds of time. Which Greek mythological creature fascinates you the most? Share your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe for more legendary tales from Greek mythology. You thought fairy tales were magical. Think again. The real origins of these classic tales are disturbing, gruesome, and filled with horror. Many of these stories have been sanitized for modern audiences, but their original versions were filled with betrayal, curses, and brutal consequences. From Pinocchio's horrifying fate to the true story of Bluebeard, let's dive into the darker side of fairy tales that history tried to erase. Fairy tales weren't always about happily ever after. Many of them were cautionary tales, warning of real dangers, human cruelty, and supernatural horrors. 1. The original Pinocchio, a gruesome fate. Before Disney made him a lovable puppet, Carlo Collodi's original Pinocchio was a terrifying little troublemaker. Instead of learning his lesson, he was hanged from a tree by a group of bandits, left to suffocate as a punishment for his misdeeds. 2. Bluebeard, the serial killer's tale. Bluebeard was not a misunderstood nobleman. He was a full-blown serial killer. In Charles Perrault's version, Bluebeard marries multiple women and forbids them from entering one locked room. When his latest wife disobeys, she discovers the corpses of his past wives hanging from hooks. He nearly kills her too, but she's saved at the last second by her brothers. Some believe this gruesome tale was inspired by real-life figures like Gilles de Rais, a nobleman convicted of horrific crimes. 3. The Pied Piper, a tale of mass disappearance. The Pied Piper of Hamelin was not just about a man who played music to lead away rats. He also took the children. In some versions, the town refuses to pay him for his services, so he takes revenge by luring all of their children into a cave, where they are never seen again. Historians believe this could be based on a real event, where an entire group of children from Hamelin mysteriously vanished in the Middle Ages. 4. Rumpelstiltskin, a vengeful trickster. In the original versions of Rumpelstiltskin, when the young queen guesses his name, he doesn't just leave. He flies into a rage so intense that he tears himself in half. In some versions, he stomps on the ground in fury, falling into a pit and disappearing forever. His obsession with taking the queen's child has led some to believe he wasn't just a trickster, but something far darker. 5. The Robber Bridegroom, a wedding night nightmare. This lesser-known grim tale tells the story of a young woman forced to marry a wealthy man. Suspicious of her husband-to-be, she follows him to his home, only to discover that he and his band of robbers murder and eat women. She watches in horror as they butcher a young girl, cutting her into pieces. Luckily, she escapes and exposes them, leading to their execution. 6. The Juniper Tree, a tale of cannibalism and revenge. One of the most horrifying grim fairy tales, The Juniper Tree tells of a stepmother who decapitates her stepson, cooks his body, and feeds it to his unsuspecting father. The boy's sister buries his bones under a juniper tree, and from the tree the boy returns as a vengeful spirit, transforming into a bird and